Good morning. Welcome back to an interview with a vampire by Anne Rice. No, said the vampire, I could not have stopped him. And you must understand, I knew that he killed humans every night. Animals gave him no satisfaction whatsoever. Animals were to be banked on when all else failed, but never to be chosen. If I felt any sympathy for the women, it was buried deep in my own turmoil. I still felt in my chest the little hammer heart of that starving child. I still burned with the questions of my own divided nature. I was angry that Lestat had staged this show for me, waiting till I woke to kill the women. And I wondered again if I might somehow break loose from him and felt both hatred and my own weakness more than ever. Meantime, he propped their lovely corpses on the table and went about the room, lighting all the candles until it blazed as if for a wedding. Come on, Louis, he said. I would have arranged an escort for you, but I know what a man you are about choosing your own. Pity Mademoiselle Fenier likes to hurl flaming lanterns. It makes a party unwieldy, don't you think? Especially for a hotel. He seated the blonde-haired girl so that her head lay to one side against the damask back of the chair, and the darker woman lay with her chin resting. What in the world? Resting just above her breasts. This one had blanched, and her features had a rigid look to them already, as though she was one of those women in whom the fire personally makes beauty. But the other looked only as if she slept, and I was not sure that she was even dead. Lestat had made 2 gashes, one on the throat and one above her left breast, and both still bled freely. He lifted her wrist now, slitting it with a knife, filled 2 wine glasses, and bade me to sit down. I'm leaving you, I said to him at once. I wish to tell you that now. I thought as much, he answered, sitting back in the chair, and I thought as well that you would make a flowery announcement. Tell me what a monster I am. What a vulgar find. I make no judgments upon you. I'm not interested in you. I am interested in my own nature now, and I've come to believe I can't trust you to tell me the truth about it. You use knowledge for personal power, I told him, and I suppose, in the manner of many people making such an announcement, I was not looking to him at all. I was mainly listening to my own words. But now I saw that his face was once again the way it had been when he had said we would talk. He was listening to me. I was suddenly at a loss. I felt the gulf between us as painfully as ever. Why did you become a vampire? I blurted out. And why such a vampire as you are? Vengeful and delighting in taking human life, even when you have no need. The girl, why did you kill her when one would have done? And why did you frighten her so before you killed her? And why have you propped her here in some grotesque manner, as if tempting the gods to strike you down for your blasphemy? All this he listened to without speaking, and in the pause that followed, I again felt at a loss. Lestat's eyes were large and thoughtful. I had seen them that way before, but I couldn't remember when, certainly not when talking to me. What do you think a vampire is? He asked me sincerely. I don't pretend to know. You pretend to know. What is it? I asked. And to this he answered nothing. It was as if he sensed the insincerity of it, the spite. He just sat there looking at me with the same still expression. Then I said, I know that after leaving you, I shall try to find out. I'll travel the world, if I have to find other vampires. I know they must exist. I don't know of any reasons why they shouldn't exist in greater numbers. And I'm confident I shall find vampires who have more in common with me than I with you. Vampires who understand knowledge, as I do, and have used their superior vampire nature to learn secrets of which you don't even dream. If you haven't told me everything, I shall find things out for myself, or from them, when I find them. He shook his head. Louis, he said, you are in love with the mortal nature. You chase after the phantoms of your former self. Frenier, his sister, these are images for you of what you were and what you still long to be. And in your romance with mortal life, you you dread you're dead to your vampire nature. I objected this at once. My vampire nature had been for me the greatest adventure of my life, and all that went before it was confused, clouded. I went through mortal life like a blind man groping from a solid object to a solid object. It was only when I became a vampire that I respected for the first time all of life. I saw a living, pulsing human being until I was a vampire. I never knew what life was until it ran out in a red gush over my lips, my hands. I found myself staring at the two women, the darker one now turning a terrible shade of blue. The blonde was breathing. She's not dead, I said to him suddenly. I know. Let her alone, he said. He lifted her wrist and made a new gash by the scab of the other and filled his glass. All that you say makes sense, he said to me. Take a drink. You're an intellect. I've never been. What I've learned from listening to men talk, not from books. I never went to school long enough. But I'm not stupid, and you must listen to me because you are in danger. You do not know your vampire nature. You are like an adult who, looking back on his childhood, realizes that he never appreciated it. You cannot, as a man, go back to the nursery and play with your toys, asking for the love and care to be showered on you again simply because now you know their worth. So it is with you and mortal nature. You've given it up. You no longer look through a glass sea darkly, but you cannot pass back to the world of human warmth with your new eyes. I know that well enough, I said, but what is that is our nature. If I can live from the blood of animals, why should I not live from the blood of animals rather than go through the world bringing misery and death to human creatures? Does it bring you happiness? He said. You, you wander through the night feeding on rats like a pauper, and the moon of Babette's window, filled with care, yet helpless as the goddess who came by the night to watch the Endymion sleep, who and could not have him, and suppose you could hold her in your arms, and she would look on you without horror and disgust. What then? A few short years to watch her suffer every prick of mortality and then die before your eyes? Does this give you happiness? This is insanity, Louis. This is vain, and what truly lies before you is vampire nature, which is killing. For I guarantee you that if you walk the streets tonight and strike down a woman as rich and beautiful as Babette, and suck her blood until she drops at your feet. You will have no hunger left for Babette's profile in the candlelight, or for listening by the window for the sound of her voice. You will be filled, Louis, as you were meant to be, and with all the life that you can hold. And you will have hunger when that's gone for the same, and the same, and the same. The red in his glass will be just as red, the roses on the wallpaper just as delicately drawn, and you will see the moon the same way, and the same flicker of a candle, and with the same sensibility that you cherish you will see death in all its beauty, life as it is only known on the very point of death. Don't you understand that, Louis? You alone of all creatures can see death that way with impurity. You alone, under the rising moon, can strike like the hand of God. Interesting. He sat back down, drained the glass, and his eyes moved over the unconscious woman. Her breast heaved and her eyebrows knit as if she were coming around. A moan escaped her lips. He had never spoken such words to me before, and I had not thought him capable of it. Vampires are killers, he said. Now, predators whose all-seeing eyes were meant to give them detachment, the ability to see human life in its entirety, not with mawkish sorrow, but with a thrilling satisfaction in being the end of that life, in having a hand in the divine plan. That is how you see it, I protested. The girl moaned again. Her face was very white. Her head rolled against the back of the chair. That is the way it is, he answered. You talk of finding other vampires. Vampires are killers. They don't want you or your sensibility. They'll see you coming long before you see them, and they'll see your flaw. And distrusting you, they'll seek to kill you. They seek to kill you even if you were like me, because they are lone predators and seek for companionship no more than cats in the jungle. They're jealous of their secret and of their territory, and if you find one, or more of them together, it will be for safety only, and one will be the slave of the other, the way you are of me. I'm not your slave, I said to him. But as he spoke, I realized I had been his slave all along. That's how vampires increase, through slavery. How else? He asked. He took the girl's wrist again, and she cried out. As the knife cut, she opened her eyes slowly as he held her wrist over the glass. She blinked and strained to keep them open. It was as if a veil covered her eyes. You're tired, aren't you? He asked her. She gazed at him as if she couldn't really see him. Tired, he said, now leaning close, staring into her eyes. You want to sleep, yes? She moaned softly, and he picked her up and took her into the bedroom. Our coffins rested on the carpet against the wall, and there was a velvet-draped bed. Lestat didn't put her on the bed. He lowered her slowly into his coffin. What are you doing? I asked him, coming to the door still. The girl was looking around like a terrified child. No, she was moaning. And then, as he closed the lid, she screamed. She continued to scream within the coffin. Why do you do this, Lestat? I asked. I like to do it, he said. I enjoy it. He looked at me. I don't say that you have to enjoy it. Take your aesthete's tastes to pure things. Kill them swiftly if you will. But do it. Learn that you are a killer. Ah! He threw up his hands in disgust. The girl had stopped screaming. Now he drew up a little carved-legged chair beside the coffin, and crossing his legs, he looked at the coffin lid. His black varnished coffin, not a pure rectangular box as they are now, but tapered at both ends, and widths where the corpse might lay his hands upon his chest, it suggested the human form. It opened, and the girl sat up astonished, wild-eyed, her lips blue and trembling. "Lie down, love," he said to her, and pushed her back, and she lay near hysterical, staring up at him. "You're dead, love," he said to her, and she screamed and turned desperately in the coffin, like a fish, as if her body could escape through the sides, through the bottom. It's a coffin," she cried. "Let me out." "But we all must lie in cons eventually," he said to her. "Lie still, love. This is your coffin. Most of us never get to know what it feels like." "You know what it feels like," he said to her. I couldn't tell her whether she was listening or not, or just going wild, but she saw me in the doorway. And then she lay still, looking at Lestat, then at me. "Help me," she said to me. Lestat looked at me. "I expected you to feel these things instinctively, as I did," he said. "When it gave you that first kill, I thought you would hunger for the next and the next, that you would go to each human life as if to a full cup the way I had. But you didn't. And all this time I suppose I kept from straightening you out because you were best weaker. I'd watch you playing shadow in the night, staring at the falling rain, and I'd think, he's easy to manage, he's simple, but you're weak, Louis. You're a mark for vampires and now for humans alike. This thing with Babette has exposed us both. It's as if you want us both to be destroyed." "I can't stand to watch what you're doing," I said, turning my back. The girl's eyes were burning into my flesh. She lay, all the time he spoke, staring at me. "You can't stand it," he said. "I saw you last night with that child. You're a vampire, the same as I am." He stood up and came towards me, but the girl rose and turned to shove her down. "You think we should make her a vampire? Should our lives share our lives with her?" he asked. Instantly, I said no. "Why, because she's nothing but a whore," he asked. "A damned expensive whore at that," he said. "Can she live now, or has she lost too much?" I asked him. Touching, he said, "She can't live." "Then kill her." She began to scream. He just sat there. I turned around. He was smiling, and the girl had turned her face to the satin and was sobbing. Tear reason had almost entirely left her. She was crying and praying. She was praying to the Virgin to save her, her hands over her face now over her head, the wrists smearing blood in her hair and on the satin. I bent over the coffin. She was dying. It was true. Her eyes were burning, but the tissue around them was already bluish, and now she smiled. "You won't let me die, will you?" she whispered. "You'll save me." Lestat reached over and took her wrist. "But it's too late, love," he said. "Look at your wrist, your breast." And then he touched the wound in her throat. She put her hands to her throat and gasped. Her mouth opened. The scream strangled. I stared at Lestat. I could not understand why he did this. His face was as smooth as mine is now, more animated for the blood, but cold and without emotion. He did not leer like a stage villain, nor hunger for her suffering as if the cruelty fed him. He simply watched her. "I never meant to be bad," she was crying. "I only did what I had to do. You won't let this happen to me. You'll let me go. I can't die like this. I can't." She was sobbing, and the sobs dry and thin. "You'll let me go. I have to go to the priest. You'll let me go. But my friend is a priest, said Lestat, smiling, as if he had just thought of it as a joke. This is your funeral, dear. You see, you were at a dinner party and you died. But God has given you another chance to be absolved. Don't you see? Tell him your sins. She shook her head at first, and then she looked at me again with those pleading eyes. Is it true? She whispered. Well, said Lestat, I suppose you're not contrite, dear. I shall have to shut the lid. Stop this, Lestat, I shouted at him. The girl screaming. The girl was screaming again, and I could not stand the sight of it any longer. I bent down to her, took her hand. I can't remember my sins, she said, just as I was looking at her wrist, resolved to kill her. You mustn't try. Tell God only that you are sorry, I said, and then you'll die, and it will be over. She lay back, and her eyes shut. I sank my teeth into her wrist and began to suck her dry. She stirred once, as if dreaming, and said a name, and then when I felt her heartbeat reach the hypnotic slowness, I drew back from her, dizzy, confused for the moment, my hands reaching for the door frame. I saw her as if in a dream. The candles glared in the corner of my eye. I saw her lying utterly still, and Lestat sat composed beside her, like a mourner. An Ebus' face was still. Louis, he said to me, don't you understand? Peace will only come to you when you can do this every night of your life. There is nothing else, but this is everything. Isis' voice was almost tender as he spoke. He rose and put both his hands on my shoulders. I walked into the parlor, shying away from his touch, but not resolute enough to push him off. Come with me. Out in the streets. It's late. You haven't drunk enough. Let me show you what you are, really. Forgive me if I bungled it. Left too much to nature. Come. I can't bear it, Lestat, I said to him. You chose your companion badly. But Louis, he said, you haven't tried. The vampire stopped. He was studying the boy, and the boy, astonished, said nothing. It was true what he'd said. I had not drunk enough. Shaken by the girl's fear, I let him lead me out of the hotel, down the back stairs. People were coming now from the Conde Street ballroom, and the narrow street was jammed. There were supper parties in the hotels, and planter families were lodged in town in great numbers, and we passed through them like a nightmare. My agony was unbearable. Never since I was a human being had I felt such mental pain. It was because of all of Lestat's words had made sense to me. I knew peace only when I killed. Only for that minute, and there was no question in my mind that the killing of anything less than human being brought nothing but a vague longing, a discontent which had brought me close to humans to watch their lives through glass. I was no vampire, and in my pain I asked irrationally, like a child, could I not return? Could I not be human again? Even as the blood of that girl was warm in me, and I felt that physical thrill and strength, I asked that question. The faces of humans passed me like candle flames in the night dancing on dark waves. I was sinking into the darkness. I was weary of longing. I was around and around in the street, looking at the stars and thinking, yes, it's true. I know what he is saying is true, that when I killed there is no longing, and I can bear the truth. I can't bear it. Suddenly there was one of those arresting moments. The street was utterly quiet. We had strayed far from the main part of the old town and were near the ramparts. There were no lights, only the fire in a window, and the far-off sound of people laughing, but no one here, no one near us. I could feel the breeze suddenly from the river and the hot air of the night rising in Lestat near me. So still he might have been made of stone. Over the long, low row of pointed roofs were the massive shapes of oak trees in the dark, great swaying forms of myriad sounds under the low-hung stars. The pain for the moment was gone. The confusion was gone. I closed my eyes and heard the wind and the sound of water flowing softly, swiftly in the river. It was enough for one moment, and I knew that it would not endure, that it would fly away from me like something torn out of my arms. And I would buy after it, more desperately lonely than any creature under God, to get it back. And then a voice beside a rumbled deep in the sound of the night, a drum beat, as the moment ended, saying, "Do what is your nature to do. This is but a taste of it. Do what is your nature to do." And the moment was gone. I stood like the girl in the parlor in the hotel, dazed and ready for the slightest suggestion. I was nodding at Lestat as he nodded at me. "Pain is terrible for you," he said. "You feel it like no other creature because you are a vampire. You don't want it to go on." "No," I answered him. "I feel as I felt with her, and wed to her, weightless, caught up by a dance. That and more." His hand tightened on mine. "Don't turn it away from it. Come with me." He led me quickly through the street, turning every time I hesitated. I hesitated, his hand out for mine, and the smile on his lips, his presence, as marvelous to me as the night he'd come in my mortal life and told me we would be vampires. "Evil is a point of view," he whispered now. "We are mortal, and what we have before us are the rich feasts and the conscience cannot appreciate, and mortal men cannot know without regret. God kills, and so shall we, indiscriminately. He takes the richest and the poorest, and so shall we. For no creatures under God are as we are, none so like him as ourselves, dark angels confined to the striking limits of hell, but wandering his earth and all its kingdoms. I want a child tonight. I am like a mother. I want a child." All right. Now, I have to stop for the day. So here is a little, and tomorrow we will continue reading chapter 8 of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. And if you're interested, I am the YA horror author of Vampire Juice. I have always wanted to read a vampire book with just a splash of romance, mystery, adventure that is reminiscent of The Lost Boys. So I wrote one. Amanda and Sean stumble upon a mysterious can of juice while searching for Halloween costumes at a local store. Despite being kicked out by the sales clerk, they become obsessed with uncovering the truth behind this strange drink. With the help from some local bullies, they sneak back into the store through a crypt in the graveyard, only to find themselves in the midst of a spine-chilling adventure. Okay, if that's something that interests you, my link is in the bio. Thanks for watching, and tomorrow we will continue reading Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, and continuing to hear the rampants of Louis and Lestat.